I now invite the Premier of Victoria, the Honourable Daniel Andrews, to the stage to present on behalf of the Victorian Government. Premier.
Thanks very much, Virginia, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for that very warm welcome. Can I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to their elders past and present, to the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, to our very gracious host, Premier Palaszczuk. Thank you, Anastasia, for having driven us to be here today. Thank you for all the work that you and your officials have done to make this historic occasion and event possible. And thank you for the very warm welcome to Brisbane. To my First Minister and other ministerial colleagues that are here today, the many distinguished guests, but most importantly, to each and every one of those who have spent a lifetime of passion and hard work, care and love and diligence, changing lives and saving lives. It's very humbling to be with you today to give just a brief update on some of the work that's happening in my state. It is a great tragedy that I have to report to you that last year there were some 80,000 recorded incidents of family violence in Victoria last year. 37 of those were tragically homicides. All of them are unacceptable, and those numbers, and I agree with Mike about being as data-driven as we possibly can be, being as evidence-based as we can be. But the fact is, of course, that whilst that number of around 80,000 represented a 10% growth on the year before, there is still widespread under-reporting. There are still many who don't have the confidence, that don't have the sense of protection to come forward and seek the care and support that they so desperately need, and to ensure that the perpetrator receives the justice that they so richly deserve. Just by way of history and brief background, 2.5 years ago, before I had been given the great honour of being elected Premier of Victoria, I made a commitment on behalf of my party to establish our nation's first ever Royal Commission into family violence. It came only just a few weeks after an unspeakable crime had occurred in Victoria, one where 11-year-old Luke Batty had lost his life, one where Rosie Batty's journey as a person of courage and bravery, a person of eloquence, a person of grace, a person of great leadership, that journey began. And it inspired me to make this commitment, and I know that Rosie and all of those qualities and many more, and her hard work, I should add, has inspired all of us in lots of different ways. In March this year, that Royal Commission delivered a report of 8 volumes and 1,600 pages. It found that services were overwhelmed, that the most vulnerable were in fact the least safe, and it found that perpetrators were just not facing justice. Now, the Royal Commission made 227 recommendations, and many of you from the sector and across Australia will have seen those recommendations and seen the report. It is a work that it seems odd to say that we're proud of it. We are proud of the work that's been done, the need for it, the brutality, the honesty of it is not something that any of us should be proud of. 227 recommendations, and our government has committed to implement each and every one of them. We are investing, so that's March this year. Budget was delivered in May, but in April our initial response for the next 2 years was provided, $572 million in additional funding over the next 2 years. $87 million alone in dedicated family violence support services, a boost. This is a very big investment because it's a very big challenge. It is by far and away the number one law and order issue in our state and indeed in our nation. And our government takes the view that fundamental change, profound change is what is required if we're going to deliver different outcomes. If we're going to move from simply eloquently describing the tragedy to doing something meaningful to avoid it, then big investments and profound change are what is necessary, and it's what we are proud to be delivering. There are many initiatives I could speak of. One of them that is particularly exciting is the Rapid Housing Assistance Fund. Through common sense, through purchasing and head leasing, we are adding 308 homes very quickly into our crisis accommodation and support service network. This is about ultimately eliminating waiting lists. So instead of referring women in desperate need of safe housing to a waiting list or to completely unsuitable emergency accommodation for much longer periods of time, we are purchasing these houses using and partnering with the private sector to deliver that additional stock and to reduce and eliminate the waiting list for that crisis and emergency housing. I can't think of anything more practical, anything more important than that. Now, before the end of the year, we will deliver a 10-year plan for change, having considered and begun the implementation of each of those 227 recommendations. In it, we will be outlining a number of key outcomes. As Mike and Anastasia, and I'm sure other colleagues will speak, and indeed the Prime Minister has made the point, we need to be accountable for our investments. We need to be clear on what does a better outcome look like. We need to be much more about outcomes and much less about simply a discussion of the problem and inputs. It's not so much about what we do, it's about what is achieved as a result of those investments. Our 10-year plan for change will detail that, and there will be a number of metrics, a number of measures that we have not before brought to this challenge, that have not been laid out as clearly. Just this week I introduced myself into our Parliament a bill to write into Victorian law and to create a statutory officer, the Royal Commission Reform, the Family Violence Royal Commission Reform Implementation Monitor, someone to monitor our performance over time of each and every one of those important recommendations. These action plans will spell out as well a whole range of different reform in key areas. Privacy laws to put the safety of victims first, changes to police practice, technology, the creation of new hubs, of one-stop shops of support services that will bring together different services so victims are safe and supported, and that this journey, this often terrifying, deeply personal, challenging journey, is made just that little bit easier. To ensure a true community partnership, we have also established a number of bodies, including a Victims and Survivors Advocacy Council chaired by Rosie Batty. But there is, I think, in broader terms, another partnership that we need to form, another partnership that really does deliver on the vision of the Royal Commission and many other inquiries that have occurred across our nation. If we're to build and deliver on that vision of a community free of violence against women and their children, we need to make sure that this is not one state or one jurisdiction, but it is in fact a true national partnership. The Family Violence Royal Commission in Victoria made a number of recommendations that can only be implemented through such a national scheme, a national partnership, a national bargain, if you like, where we come together and reach that agreement. They are, in broad terms, changes to the family law system so that all of our federal courts can work together to share information and protect victims, deal with things like ensuring that no perpetrator should be able to cross-examine their victim. That's a change that surely we can make in every court right across every jurisdiction. A new Medicare item number for family violence counselling services for victims and their children, so that you don't have GPs having to squeeze into inappropriate categories to misdefine family violence victims in order for them to secure the counselling and support services they need. We have enough victims of family violence. Their needs are clearly known and understood. We should have a proper recognition of those needs in our universally supported and universal health system, Medicare. That item number, that provider pathway to provide better care is not negotiable and something that we should commit all of us to working towards delivering. Paid family violence leave in national employment standards, I think the time has come for us to make this change. I'm very proud to say that in public service agreements, and again, just as Anastasia made the point, the Queensland Government's the biggest employer in Queensland, so too is Victoria, so on and so forth. We need to be employers of best practice. We need to be employers that lead from the front. That's why we've embedded into all of our enterprise bargaining agreements for the public sector and others that will flow 20 days of family violence leave. I'd hope that we could come to an agreement as a nation to do the same in our national employment standards. That ought not be something we argue about. We should be very proud to make that change and to agree to it. I think protection for migrant victims of family violence under Australian law is also important, because the impacts of family violence really are no different. Your immigration status does not determine whether you are a victim, whether you are in need of support, care and love, and that the perpetrator against you is equally entitled to justice. Extending funding agreements on homelessness and legal services, these are more practical matters. They are always matters of budget capacity, but I don't see these as costs so much as profound investments in much better outcomes. And dealing with the confusion that Premier Baird spoke about just a moment ago, it is a big and complex system. Without people to navigate through it, without additional funding to support those things that we all know work, we'll never get better outcomes. Delegates, I come to the summit today and I'll come back to COAG again later this year, seeking the support of the Commonwealth Government and of states and territories to deliver on these changes, to deliver on these truly national priorities. They are some among many, but they are things that ought not be beyond any of us. Just in closing, can I speak about another area of critical reform, an area that we've touched on this morning in some very eloquent presentations from those who've spoken before me. The Royal Commission in Victoria told us what we all know here, and that is that family violence is a gendered crime. It has an ideology too, I'm sad to say, one of privilege and entitlement, one of power and, sadly, one of control. Poor attitudes of one generation will be bequeathed to the next generation unless we do something about it. Poor, bad outcomes for women start with bad attitudes towards women. And we have a unique position, all of us as leaders across our nation, to do something about that. And whether it's an advertising campaign to drive behavioural and attitudinal change, or whether it's more practical things where we can again lead by example, lead by our conduct, and change the conduct and attitudes of others. We're going to be releasing a primary prevention strategy and a gender equality strategy later this year and into the new year. And of course, Australia's first Minister for the Prevention of Family Violence, Fiona Richardson, will be driving and leading that work. We are very proud to have made strong investments in primary prevention and secondary prevention, but there are some other very straightforward things that we can do, and I would commend to colleagues one of them. Just a little while ago, earlier this year, I made an announcement, and we have delivered on it, that 50% of all appointments that our government made to government boards and to the courts, to the Magistrates' Court, the County Court, the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, all courts, all of those appointments would be 50% women. We have delivered on that, such that all 50% of board appointments have been female and 52% of those who have joined the judiciary appointed by our government are women. Those appointments speak really loudly about what equality means. It also means we get a unique understanding about this gendered crime, and it means we stop locking out 50% of the community from the decisions that affect them. It means we stop locking out 50% of all the best of our nation from tackling challenges just like family violence. We need to make profound change. We need to make profound investments. I think all of us here today know that if we don't do that, more of the same policy will simply mean more of the same tragedy. Anastasia, thank you so much for having us. To colleagues and to everybody here, thank you for all that you do. The lives you change, the lives you save. We are very proud of you, and you too should be proud of your leadership, not just in your jurisdiction or your sector, but the work we are all doing here is leading the world as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Premier Andrews. And I must just say, as the new director of the 50/50 by 2030 Foundation at the University of Canberra, it is wonderful to hear about the progress Victoria is making in that regard.